In reply to Vasishta's request for a fuller explanation of Shiva, Brahman, Self, why they are so called and how such differences arose, the Lord continued. The reality is beginningless and endless, and it is not even reflected in anything. That is the reality. However, since it is not possible to experience it through the mind and the senses, it is even regarded as if it were non-being. I get the impression this passage has been abridged, and it's quite clear the answer doesn't really have much to do with the question. Vasishta was asking how Shiva, Brahman and Self came to be designated as such, and how there came to be differences between them, because sometimes Shiva is understood as Brahman. But Shiva is not going to go there, not bothering with any conceptualization here. It's beginningless and endless, and it is not even reflected in anything. We're often told that everything is reflected in consciousness. It's something I've always felt a bit uncomfortable about, because it's presupposing there's something out there being reflected in consciousness. The idea is that consciousness is like a mirror, getting lost in its own reflection. Although it's probably more like a television. Television has all these dramas going on its screen, but the television is not affected by any of the dramas. So perhaps if the Yoga Vasishta was written at the time they had televisions, that's the analogy that would be used. And as far as the dramas on the television are concerned, the television doesn't exist. The dramas on the television are not going to be concerned about the nature of the television that's presenting the drama. So as far as the dramas are concerned, the television is non-being. And the same with awareness. Awareness is like the television, and we've got all these dramas going on, internal and external dramas. We ignore the television completely, and some would even say it doesn't even exist. And some would make a point of arguing quite strongly for its non-existence. In reply to Vasishta's question, if it is beyond the mind, how is it realized? The Lord replied, in the case of the seeker who is eager to attain freedom from ignorance, and who is therefore equipped with what is termed Satvic avidya, which means subtle ignorance, it's a slighter form of ignorance. This Satvic avidya, with the help of what are known as scriptures, removes the ignorance, just as a washerman removes dirt with the help of another form of dirt, soap. By this catalytic action, the ignorance is removed, the self realizes the self, and the self sees the self on account of its own self-luminous nature. Well, that's all a bit neat and tidy, isn't it? But I would say that anybody who's interested in this stuff, there's a possibility that it's going to happen. There's a possibility that you can realize the truth even if you're not interested in any of this. It can happen spontaneously. But if you're seeking, you will more than likely find at some point. If you're truly seeking, you will find. And scriptures and books can be a help. So I think basically if you are looking, you will find at some point. The Lord continued, when a child is playing with charcoal, his hands become black. If he washes his hands, but immediately plays again with charcoal, his hands become black again. However, if he does not handle charcoal again after washing, his hands can remain clean. Even so, if one inquires into the nature of the self, and at the same time refrains from those actions that promote avidya or ignorance, the darkness of ignorance vanishes. However, it is only the self that becomes aware of the self. The self becomes aware of the self, or it gets caught up in its notions, it gets caught up in its emotional tendencies. We must be careful here about talking about activities that are going to make us dirty or encourage lack of wisdom. There is no inherent value spiritually in any particular activity. The point is whether our attention is lost in that activity or not, whether it's been hijacked by that activity. We've got the choice of whether our attention gets hijacked or not. And sometimes that hijacking has got the force of an addiction. And this is avidya, this is ignorance. And the extent to which we allow that is the extent to which we're ignorant. Do not look upon this diversity as the self. And diversity here is about getting caught up in all the diverse notions that we're swimming around in. Do not entertain the feeling that self-knowledge is the result of the teaching of a preceptor. In other words, there's no point in feeling that you've got to get a guru. This used to be a prime aspect of the spiritual search, looking for the guru. The guru or the preceptor is endowed with the mind and the senses. The self or Brahman is beyond the mind and the senses. We're looking for that which is beyond the mind and the senses. That which is attained only after the other ceases is not attained with its help while it still exists. So we're talking about the mind and the senses here. That which is attained only after the mind and senses cease is not attained with the help of the mind and the senses. That which is attained by going beyond the mind and the senses is not attained with the help of the mind and the senses. However, though the instructions of a preceptor and all the rest of it are not really the means for the attainment of self-knowledge, they have come to be regarded as the means for it. So we need to be very careful about this whole guru thing and putting our faith in the guru to get us there. We need to look to ourselves